Welcome back to Long Delays Hobbies. I picked up the Burning of the Westfold journal for Middle-earth strategy battle game. I haven't had a chance to look through it yet, so I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to look through it together. Let's crack it open and take a look. So just looking at the table of contents, it looks like we've got our scenarios. We've got 11 scenarios, unless I miscounted. And we've also got some cool hobby sections we'll go over once we get there. It looks like we've gotten most of these scenarios before in one form or another. In the previous edition, they released the Warren Rohan supplement, as well as I think there was another supplement for Rohan where I think we would have gotten almost all, maybe even all of these scenarios, and they've just kind of reworked them so that you can play them using the rules for the new edition. So we'll take a quick look at them. Here's just kind of an overview and introduction with some really cool artwork, which we can pause on. It looks like in this artwork they are using the new sculpts for the riders as well as for the warriors. And in this one, we've got Uruk-hai and the Dunlin command set. If you see it here, we've got those sculpts are in this artwork. We've got a nice campaign system so that you can play these with linked scenarios, which they've done in the previous books as well. Really cool. If you want to play them like back to back, the winners get bonuses. So the first scenario is Rampage over Rohan. So it looks like they're really showing off the new Dunlin command set, because this is the chieftain that comes in that command set. This scenario is just generic Warriors of Rohan and generic Wild Men of Dunlin, and you can play this just with one box of warriors and one box of wild men or hill tribesmen. The next scenario is the Prince of Rohan. So this has Theodred in it, and it does have the new Theodred miniature. This is the scenario in which Theodred kind of goes out and starts campaigning against the wild men to put an end to their campaigning. We've got the Fords of Isen, which is the scenario in which Theodred was killed. This is the first one where we see Uruk-hai. So you need some scout captains as well as wild men in this scenario. Warg riders as well. So we've got Ambush at Night. So this is the scenario in which Aemir and some of the other riders of Rohan come across Ugluk Grishnak, and some orcs and Uruk-hai in the middle of the night and slaughter them. Looks like there's kind of a cool mechanic with Merry and Pippin where you want Merry and Pippin to stay alive. So that's kind of interesting. This is a classic, the Warg Attack scenario. You know, this is from the scene in the movie where Gamling and Theoden and the rest of the heroes from the movie are moving to escape to Helm's Deep, and they get ambushed by Sharku and some Warg riders. We've got to the walls of Helm's Deep. So this is our scenario where they're on top of the walls, and we've got our Uruk-hai demolition teams. This is the scene where they're just kind of outside the walls waiting for the Uruk-hai to get in. Again, very similar to previous scenarios in the past that they've released for this, but it's good that it's now released in this kind of updated format. I don't see any major differences in the way that this has been released before. I know some people have kind of complained that they're just releasing the same scenario again. You know, not everyone has access to those older books that were released at this point, 20 years ago. So you might as well make them available for publication again. So we got Ride Out from the scene where Aragorn, Legolas, Theoden, they all ride down the Deeping Wall. And Aemir's Return, which is when Gandalf and Aemir are kind of at the top, the first light of the fifth day. And Siege of Helm's Deep. This is interesting that they've placed this here. If you want to play okay, so I see what they've done here. So these three are kind of like mini scenarios. If you want to do different parts of the battle, one by one as different scenarios. Siege of Helm's Deep. If you've played this game for a while, this is kind of the more famous scenario. This is literally the entire battle from the beginning to the end, from where the Uruk-hai come up and start besieging you all the way to the end where Aemir and Gandalf show up. I've played this scenario before. It takes a very long time because you've got like 85 Uruk-hai on one side, and you've got like a huge amount of Rohan on the other side, and they've got to like break down the wall. It takes like 3 to 4 hours to play the scenario, and that's if you're rolling dice really quickly. If you're kind of being a little bit more chill about it, I could easily see this taking 4 to 5 hours. Past the Druidan. So this is our Wozus scenario. This is only in the books, where the Riders of Rohan are kind of making their way from Rohan to Minas Tirith after they've been summoned, and they encounter some of the wild men of Druidon, who help them kill some of the orcs who were down there. And of course, the Ride of the Rohirrim, the most famous scene probably in the whole movie, maybe arguably in all cinema. All right, now for our hobby section. Okay, so we've got a section on Rohan settlements. Is this just, let's look at the artwork. It looks like it's just warriors of Rohan and some hill tribesmen. They have an interesting caveat. Games Workshop bears no responsibility for any non-Games Workshop product or materials used in your process. That's an interesting note they have there. They're kind of assuming that you're going to use non-Games Workshop materials. So they got a bit about how to make great halls. So this is kind of something that I think most people already know how to do, at least this part. You just kind of take two kits and put them together, and it makes it into a hall. They give you how to paint them, which is, you know, it's kind of nice, but you can kind of paint them however you want. It's good they give you some idea of how to paint them here. For the stables, all they did is just cut the walls in half, which makes sense because the walls in the kit, they're solid, so you would need to cut them in half, but that's all they kind of did. They just cut them in half here, and they did everything else the same, but with a half a wall and some of these structures in place, it kind of looks like a stable. They looks like they got some hay or something. You can get that from Amazon or any kind of hobby store, even just generic hobby stores. You don't need to go to Specialist Hobby Game Store. Like even a craft store would probably have something like this. I'm not sure where they got this rope though, but I don't think that would be too hard to come by, and it's not even really necessary. Oh yeah, the hay is made from an old brush bristles clumped together, so that's where they got the hay. It's just old brushes. Torched house. I've seen people do this. This is pretty simple to do, but I'm glad they're giving you a guide. You know, it never hurts to have someone do it for you and kind of give you an idea of how to do it. You know, you build this half kind of on its own. You get like a couple kits of this. You get a couple of these Great Hall kits. You use part of it to make this Great Hall, and you use the remainder to build this torched house. Obviously, you would need to do this multiple times to make 2 tables. All these beams and stuff they're actually on the inside of the kit. I actually have a Rohan house with me so I can show you. And yeah, so here's what the inside of a Rohan house looks like. If you're actually building this as a normal house, you're gonna glue this on, and you're never gonna see the inside of the house, right? You're just gonna glue this and just be on your merry way. If you're building it like this, like a torched house, the idea is you have like one of these that you're gonna build like this. And I guess what they're saying is you cut this out, these beams and stuff out, and use them here. Yeah, the beams are made from cutting up other section of walls and gluing them in place. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Now, that seems like a lot of work to me. Sure, you could do that. You could just go and cut these beams out. They would probably look good, although, you know, you run the risk of damaging like this house. The problem you run into is that you need a lot of houses to do that. You know, this is probably like 3 houses worth of just beams. I think you're probably better off looking around at a hobby store for little sticks or whatever, little square sticks, little square pegs or something like that. You know, and gluing those on and making them look like that. You know what you could also just use? You could just use sprue probably and just glue it here with plastic glue or whatever. And then once you primed it, it will look fine. You know, you could just run some plastic glue over here to make it melt on a little bit on the end to make it look like it's damaged. And you can do the same thing here. Just throw some sprue in here. Again, once you've primed it and made it look like it's damaged a little bit, they'll just look like they're beams that have fallen in. And then just throw some other random things in there. You know, if you have a spare Rohan helmet, throw it in there. Or barrels from some other kit you've got laying around. Just throw some random junk in there. It'll look fine. Okay, the storehouse. Yeah, I think it's just half of a kit. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it is literally just, like, there's really no difference. It's just built a little bit differently. I think all you do is kind of align it a little bit differently. It's just kind of like half of what they give you. So you could probably make 2 of these out of 1 Rohan house. And the kit does come with these barrels. You can use this, I guess normally you would use them as scatter terrain, but you could also just glue them onto a base like this. Plains of Rohan. So this is kind of cool. So they're actually telling you how to make a board. I don't recall them doing this in a long time. They used to do stuff like this in like White Dwarf. It's not something that they do recently just because they don't make any money off of it. So the only thing here you can see that they sell is the tufts. And I honestly forgot that they even sell tufts because they're so expensive. I don't buy tufts from them. Most people don't. But yeah, no, it's kind of cool. It's kind of honestly pretty straightforward. Yeah, I'm not going to go into detail on this, but yeah, you buy foam, you buy rocks and grass and dirt and sticks, and you put the rocks and grass and sticks onto the foam. All right, job done. And they tell you how to paint it. If you really want to spend a lot of money, you can paint a giant foam board using Games Workshop paint. Don't do that, by the way. You do not use Games Workshop paint on a giant foam board. Use craft paint or something. So we got a guide on how to make a Fords of Eisen board. So this is fairly similar to the previous one, except they are telling us to use clear resin. So do the same thing we just did for the Plains of Rohan. So in this Fords of Eisen board, they're actually telling us that you need to pour clear resin. They're not really giving us detailed instructions on how to do that, which, it kind of makes sense because they don't sell clear resin for pouring. But, this is fairly detailed. You would need to be pretty intense in order to actually make a board like this. And not to mention, you would need a lot of storage space, because this is like a 4x4 static piece that you can't be collapsed down or anything like that. So once you build it, it's going to have to be stored somewhere. I appreciate that they're doing this. Not something that I would do unless I had maybe a lot more storage than what I have now. But it's a very interesting hobby project. There's the final result once you get that resin board. I find it a little disappointing that most of the steps are just wash this 4x4 piece with Agrax Earthshade, which if you want to do that, more power to you, but I strongly recommend that you not do that, because that's, number one, it's going to be very expensive and time consuming. So I wouldn't even use a miniature wash for something like this. That would just use something you buy at the craft store. Okay, we do have some nice little artwork here for what that's worth. Okay, now something that can probably appeal to everyone, which is how to paint horses. So if you've just picked up those Riders of Rohan and are looking for a way to paint horses, I think everyone is always looking for like a cheat code on horses, because they aren't necessarily easy. Like everyone else, I look around, okay, is there an easier way to paint them? Almost everyone is doing contrast, and I personally don't think contrast looks good. Well, it doesn't usually look good, full stop, but it really doesn't look good on horses, because you end up with like a glossy coat. But what I like about this is that none of these are using contrast paint. This is all traditional paints. I've never used this particular method before, starting with an XV88 base coat for light brown. So I'm gonna actually follow this one and give it a try next time I want to paint some light brown horses. Unfortunately, I've just finished painting all of my Riders of Rohan. I don't have any more to paint, but I'm sure I'll get some in the future. They give those away in pretty much every set. So next time I get a set, I'm sure we'll have Riders of Rohan in it. I do have some black horses to paint. I have some Kondish cavalry that I need to get painted. Quite a lot of Kondish cavalry, actually. So I'm gonna give that a try. I think this is basically the same method that I used, so this isn't gonna be too different. And actually, if you read this is not quite the same method. So it's not just Abbott and Back Mechanica Standard Grade Dawnstone. It goes into more detail if you read the text. So I appreciate that. This is like just the right level of detail for someone like me. Now, one thing I guess I could criticize them is it doesn't give you information on how to paint the details, like the straps, but that's not really a big deal. I mean, painting leather straps is always going to be the same. You would paint the same as how you would paint, the leather jerkins or whatever. So that's not that big of a deal. This to me is like probably the best hobby thing that they've done in all of the hobby books that they've released so far this edition. I think the third one that they've released. And this is by far the most useful thing that they've come out with. And here's our closing shot. Looks like we've got some houses being burned with Uruk-hai attacking them in the middle of the night, with Éomer screaming in, going to put them all down. So that's the end of the book. Overall, I think quite a good book. The hobby sections were a mix of being very intense with the creation of an entire board. I think that's probably too intense for most people. But the bits on how to paint horses, that's actually very useful. I think almost anyone who is in this hobby or is in working on Middle Earth is going to find that very useful, in my opinion. The actual scenarios, as I said, they're not reinventing the wheel with those scenarios. They're great scenarios. We have seen them before, but they're still very good scenarios. I'm glad that they're publishing them again. I've been playing this game for a number of years now, and so I know I know people have been playing this game longer than me. They'll probably say, well, I've seen the Siege of Helm's Deep before. Why do I need to see it republished again? And not everyone has that perspective. There will be someone who has never had a book with the Siege of Helm's Deep in it before, and they won't necessarily be able to pick up those older scenarios. I'm in that position myself. Like, I've wanted to pick up older journals or older supplements, and you just can't get them, not for any reasonable price. If you're just someone who wants to play those scenarios, I think it's a good thing to just make them available again. As far as, the lack of competitive content, I know that's something that people bring up every single time they release one of these books. I think we can now say that these journals are not going to be the vehicle for that. I mean, this is now the third one that they've released. They're not going to put Legendary Legions, competitive updates. They're not going to come via these journals. So I hope that people now can stop getting their hopes up or stop complaining that, hey, this journal doesn't have any competitive updates in it. This journal doesn't have any new Legendary Legions in it. These journals should not be expected to have any competitive content in them going forward. So the next time they announce one, which will probably be by the end of the year, we shouldn't expect whatever that journal will be to have competitive content in it. It will be very similar to this. It'll have campaigns in it. As to what that could be, I mean, let's speculate. I still think we'll probably get a Hobbit-based supplement at some point. I also think, since it is the 25th anniversary of the Fellowship of the Ring, I still think we might get a Plastic Fellowship. There were rumors around there floating that we might get it by the end of the year, to celebrate the 25th anniversary. It would kind of make sense if we got a journal like focused around the Quest of the Fellowship. In the previous edition, it was called the Quest of the Ring Bearer. That wouldn't be shocked. I'll just say that if we got, like, let's say a new Plastic Fellowship to replace the really, really old one that a lot of people don't like, and a narrative journal with the Quest of the Ring Bearer type of supplement. It wouldn't be called that. It would be, they always think of some new different name for it, because this supplement was called War in Rohan before, and they've now renamed it to Burning of the Westfold. So they'll call it something new, but it will be essentially the Quest of the Ring Bearer supplement that with most of those scenarios in it. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So, do you have any thoughts about what the next narrative journal will be? Do you have any new thoughts about what the next release could be? I still think it might be the Fellowship if we get something else this year, but who knows? It might be something else. So go ahead and put your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching this video. And on your way out, if you would be so kind to like and subscribe, it would be very much appreciated. And don't forget to have a great day. Take care.